One thing that troubles me is the lack of precise chemistry terms in medicine. I am not a physician. I'm definitely not a cardiologist. I'm a biomedicinal chemist. Physicians should do a better job of conveying exactly what they mean unambiguously. Otherwise, the patients will get confused. And sometimes I think physicians get confused. Okay, I'd like to talk about cholesterol. What is cholesterol? Cholesterol is this molecule, specifically that molecule. If I change one atom, it's not cholesterol. If I change the three-dimensional shape around some atoms, it's not cholesterol. When I say cholesterol, I mean this and only this. What is a lipoprotein particle? Now that's much more variable. When someone eats food, they generate globules, spheres in the bloodstream containing fatty substances. These globules start big and they visit cells in various organs and they drop off some of their cargo, nutrition, to cells so that they can metabolize. So as less and less of the cargo remains, the particles contract, and eventually when they get small enough, we call them low-density lipoparticles. These lipoparticles, LDLs, carry on getting smaller and smaller, and eventually they may become problematic because they can insert between epithelial cells. If they become inserted, then HDL particles, these are high-density lipoproteins, the smallest kind, cannot pick them up so well, so they accumulate there. That doesn't mean that it's necessarily bad at that stage, but they do accumulate. So what is a lipoparticle? In general, a lipoparticle consists of a protein, maybe only one protein per particle, wrapped around the surface, and the surface is formed by phospholipids. Please refer to my previous video if you don't know what a phospholipid is. That surface also contains some cholesterol. Inside this sphere is some cholesterol in the form of esters with fatty acids, but it's also triglycerides. What is the composition of any of these particles in the chain, and particularly LDL, we can't say for sure. It depends on what you ate last night. It depends on how long ago you ate it. It might even depend on how much you've exercised the morning of the test, because the composition of these particles is different. We can assume we know, but we don't know exactly. Okay, let's look at an LDL particle specifically. LDL particles have one molecule of apoprotein B wrapped around the surface, and they contain triglycerides and some cholesterol as esters, some cholesterol in the surface of the lipid particle. Is it right to call LDL cholesterol? No. To a chemist, that's ridiculous. We don't really know the composition of LDL. It just contains some cholesterol. And there's a world of difference. Cholesterol is a greasy substance. It's a lipid. And I produced a video about what lipids are in general. And cholesterol is just one example of a steroid, and a steroid is just one class of lipid. How is LDL routinely measured? This is a source of big confusion, I think. LDL is routinely measured by, first of all, measuring the amount of cholesterol in the blood. We can homogenize the blood, break up these particles, and measure the concentration of cholesterol, that discrete molecule, very accurately. HDL particles can also be measured, but LDL particles can't be measured directly. There's an equation called the free wall equation, which estimates LDL levels based on total cholesterol and HDL particles. And it's assuming the cholesterol levels in LDL will be pretty much similar. But we know that may not be true. And out of that test comes two terms which I think amplify the confusion, because people use LDL interchangeably with the term called LDL-C. That's LDL cholesterol, because cholesterol was used to calculate the number of LDL particles. But that further implicates cholesterol as being the major player in LDL particles, and that may or may not be true. This Friedwald equation, this way of calculating LDL levels, of course, is to correlate with risk of heart disease. It's not very good. There are better ways, and one of the ways emerges from the Amoris study. That's a Swedish study over decades involving hundreds of thousands of people taking biomarkers at reasonably regular intervals. And out of that study, based on a lot of statistical analysis, comes the conclusion that a good predictor for cardiovascular risk is actually ApoB, that's the protein that surrounds LDL particles, one protein per particle, ratio of ApoB to ApoA1. ApoA1 is an apoprotein similar but associated with HDL particles. That ratio is proven to be a better indicator. Does your physician talk to you about that ratio? I wonder, because it's relatively new. This graph shows major atherosclerotic cardiovascular events and correlates with low ApoB to ApoA1 ratio. That's in green here. So that's the bottom right of this plot. But as we go to the top left, then ApoB relative to ApoA1 is increasing. Now, why is it important to me not to get cholesterol confused with other things? Because what gets managed gets treated. If a patient goes away and worries about cholesterol, they may be worried about something that's not directly causing their heart disease. If a physician focuses on cholesterol because they can measure it, they also may be missing the cause. People talk about cholesterol blocking their arteries. Is that really true? What are atherosclerotic plaques composed of? This author, very well qualified, Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, has looked at this for 50 years. Unambiguously, he states, atherosclerotic plaques are mainly fibrous material. They contain lipids, and some of those lipids are cholesterol. They contain a little bit of calcium. They contain dead foam cells. But the main component is fibrous material. And this graph shows that clearly. Fibrous material is the red and the yellow component of the bars. So at early stage, it's mostly fibrous. And then the amount of lipids and foam cells increases as the plaque develops. But mostly, it remains fibrous material. And you can see that in histopathology, where you can stain fibrous material. Plaques are not cholesterol. Plaques are not LDL. Plaques can be initiated by LDL perhaps, but the cause of plaques isn't necessarily cholesterol, the molecule. So why is it important to get these terms correct? Because what gets measured gets managed. And in the conventional test, we're measuring cholesterol. And that's what physicians see as the easy opportunity to manage. And if a patient focuses on cholesterol, then they may be missing the cause of their problem. I love the next diagram. How do atherosclerotic plaques form? This diagram shows as an LDL particle gets small, it can squeeze in between epithelia. And if that LDL particle is modified, it will become an alien to macrophages. macrophages will detect this as something that needs to be removed. So how is that LDL particle modified? It's referred to as oxidized LDL-C. The macrophages attack the oxidized LDL-C. They form foam cells. Foam cells are macrophages that have become bloated with lipids. Those foam cells can die in the deposit. The macrophages build up. There's more inflammation. The plaque develops and coats fibrous material over the top, like a pimple. That thickening of the artery from the inside out is dangerous, and it's particularly dangerous if that fibrous material bursts and liberates debris into the bloodstream, which can cause heart attack and stroke. I don't like this term, oxidized LDL-C. I don't like it because it implies that the cholesterol is being oxidized. As an organic chemist, I look at the structure of cholesterol and I look at other components of the cargo, like triglycerides, and particularly triglycerides containing a double bond with the CH2 and then another double bond. For instance, linoleic acid, the main component of processed vegetable oils, as I've described in this video here. Which one of those, cholesterol or a polyunsaturated triglyceride, is most likely to be oxidized? I think any organic chemist would look at cholesterol and say, that doesn't have too many sites to be oxidized easily, but a polyunsaturated triglyceride has a CH2 between two alkenes, bisallylic. That is highly vulnerable to oxidation. If anything is more likely to be oxidized than cholesterol, it is that. An oxidized LDL-C particle may be oxidized on the triglyceride and not on the cholesterol. Now we're coming to the beginning of some very big questions. Does cholesterol cause atherosclerotic plaques? It's hard to answer this question definitively, but I'd like to talk about a couple of studies. Again, I'm not a cardiologist, I'm just a scientist, but there are some studies that I'd like to discuss with you. The first one is about people who have reached 100 years old. How do their biomarkers at 69 years of age compare with those at 100? And how did the biomarkers of people who have died sooner compare with that group? There are many conclusions in this paper, but one that's made several times is that based on a large number of people over a long period of time, there's an inverse correlation with cholesterol levels and all-cause mortality. That would be mortality from all natural causes. In other words, high cholesterol correlates with a good outcome. The second study is more comprehensive. That looks at people stratified in terms of quite young, from their 30s onwards, midlife, and older age. Let's look at the probability of death from a cardiovascular event or all causes for each 3 age groups, corrected for other factors. So on these plots here, 1 is normalized probability. Less than 1 is good, less chance of death. More than 1 is bad, more chance of dying. And you can see in the younger age group, if the cholesterol was very low, that implies some kind of abnormality here. And they had a higher probability of dying. If the cholesterol was high, higher probability of death, either from all causes or from cardiovascular problems. But that doesn't hold for the other 2 groups. Again, extremely low cholesterol correlated with a higher probability of all-cause mortality and cardiovascular problems. But as the cholesterol levels increase, all-cause mortality and cardiovascular deaths decrease for both middle-aged and older people. So you see my problem with being imprecise about what we mean by cholesterol. If a patient focuses on cholesterol as the problem, or if a physician focuses on cholesterol as a problem, that may not be so, and that may get us into trouble. Thank you very much for listening. Bye-bye.